Snow whispered through the pines like a warning. The storm had been building since dawn, veiling the Montana wilderness in silver haze. Beneath it moved a lone figure, his steps measured and heavy, boots crunching the frost into rhythm. Calder Hayes had been called many things in his life: operative, soldier, ghost, but now he was just another shadow in the snow. The wind caught his hat brim, dusting the leather with powder as he trudged toward the cabin he'd built from the bones of a forgotten life. Inside, warmth breathed from a wood stove. The walls were lined with mementos of a past he'd buried. Medals dulled by smoke, faded photos, a single knife with his initials etched into the hilt. Calder poured himself coffee, black and bitter, the only kind he could stomach. The quiet suited him. The world had moved on, full of wars he no longer fought and governments he no longer trusted. Out here, solitude was a friend that didn't ask questions. Then the silence changed. The low hum of an engine cut through the wind, alien in its precision. Calder set his cup down. The sound grew louder, too clean for a snowmobile, too deliberate for hunters. He reached for the rifle leaning against the door. By the time the black drone appeared over the ridge, he was already outside, sight steady, breath slow. The machine halted midair, a blinking blue light pulsing like a heartbeat. It projected a hologram into the snowstorm. "Mr. Hayes," said a voice, crisp, official. "You've been reactivated." Calder's expression didn't change. "No, I haven't." Global Command authorized the request. The voice continued. "Earth faces an existential threat. You're being summoned." He almost laughed, but the sound caught in his throat. "I'm retired." Retirement ended when the fleet arrived. The hologram shifted, revealing the sky, swarming ships blotting out the stars. Alien vessels, sleek and immense, hovered above continents. The invaders called themselves the Volgrath Dominion, demanding Earth's surrender under an ancient code of conquest. Their commander, Taz'kir, had issued a ritual challenge. Earth must send its strongest battalion to fight his chosen warriors. The outcome would decide humanity's fate. Calder listened, unmoving. "And you're here because no battalion can win," the voice said. "We don't have an army that stands a chance. What we do have is you." He lowered his rifle, snow melting against the barrel. The absurdity of it hit him first, a planet begging one man to fight an empire. But then came something else. A flicker of memory. Faces of comrades long gone. Promises left unkept. The guilt that had driven him into the wilderness. He thought he'd left the world to its own survival. He thought he'd earned his silence. "Why me?" he asked quietly. The hologram hesitated, as if searching for words that wouldn't sound desperate. "Because records show you've never lost." Calder looked past the drone to the mountains, dissolving into mist. He wanted to refuse, to let the earth find another savior, but deep down he knew better. There were no others like him. There never had been. He wasn't proud of that truth, but he carried it like he carried everything else, relentlessly. He holstered his rifle and stepped closer to the projection. "Where?" "Launch Site Bravo 7. You'll be briefed on arrival." "Fine," he said, "but don't call it activation. Call a mistake you'll owe me for." The drone turned, ascending through the snow. Calder watched it vanish into the storm, then returned to his cabin. He took one last look around, the knife, the medals, the silence, and shut the door behind him. By the time he reached the ridge again, the night sky was alive with alien fire. He adjusted his hat against the wind and muttered, "They asked for an army. They'll get something worse." Exactly 600 words. Calder felt the weight of the shuttle's restraints tighten as it pierced the upper atmosphere, rattling like a bullet ricocheting through a steel chamber. The craft was small, utilitarian, built for rapid insertion rather than comfort, but he welcomed the claustrophobic silence. Silence gave him room to think. He replayed the briefing in his mind. The Volgrath commander's demand for ritual combat, the Global Council's fear, the impossible expectation that one man could tip the scales. He wasn't convinced they'd made the right choice, but he understood why they'd made it. Desperation simplified decision-making. When you were out of options, you gambled on the monster you hoped was still on your side. The shuttle jolted, engines shifting to a deeper hum as the stars stretched into streaks. Calder glanced at the display. A massive shadow filled it. An alien flagship, shaped like a fractured spearhead, surface glimmering with moving plates that rearranged themselves like scales. Even through the reinforced hull, he felt the oppressive presence of the structure. It wasn't a ship. It was a floating fortress engineered to intimidate before it ever fired a shot. A voice crackled over the comms. Docking in 30 seconds. Keep your hands visible when the ramp lowers. Their sensors are sensitive. Calder snorted. I'll behave. The ramp descended with a hiss, releasing air that smelled faintly metallic, like charged ozone blended with something vegetal and unfamiliar. A squad of Volgrath guards waited, towering figures encased in dark armor that bent light around their edges. Their movements were precise, symmetrical, almost ritualistic. Calder marched forward, hands relaxed, gaze forward. He felt their eyes scanning him, searching for weakness, threat, or perhaps the reason Earth had dared send one man to answer a challenge intended for thousands. A guard gestured with his serrated staff, and Calder followed through a corridor where walls pulsed with a bioluminescent glow. Every surface felt alive, as though the ship itself was studying him with quiet contempt. He kept his breathing even, cataloging details automatically. Door placements, guard rotations, air pressure variations, anything that could become useful later. Retired or not, his instincts had never softened. They arrived in a vast amphitheater that stretched like the interior of a colossal hive. Hundreds of alien warriors surrounded the central platform, their armor glinting beneath shifting lights. Calder felt their collective judgment settle on him as he stepped forward. In the middle of the arena stood Taz'kir, taller than the rest, armored in plates that looked grown rather than forged, eyes like molten amber. He radiated authority so effortlessly that the surrounding warriors seemed dimmer by comparison. Taz'kir extended a clawed hand. Where is Earth's army? His voice resonated like grinding stone. Calder met his gaze without flinching. You're looking at it. A ripple of derisive laughter swept the arena. Some aliens thumped their chests, others hissed openly. The sound echoed off the living walls until it seemed the ship itself mocked him. Calder let it continue, unmoved. He'd been underestimated before. It never bothered him. It only clarified expectations. Taz'kir tilted his head, amusement flickering across his expression. Your world insults us, sending one frail human to stand against my chosen. Is this surrender wrapped in bravado? No, Calder said calmly. It's efficiency. The laughter died abruptly. Taz'kir studied him with a sharper focus, as though searching for the trap hidden beneath the words. He gestured to the arena floor, then stepped forward, solitary warrior. The trial begins now. Survive, and I will consider your planet worthy of negotiation. Fail, and humanity kneels. Calder walked to the center circle, feeling the weight of every gaze converging on him. The floor vibrated as distant gates began to open. He rolled his shoulders, tightened his gloves, and steadied his breath. He wasn't here to impress them. He was here to win. Exactly 600 words. Calder felt the arena floor shift beneath his boots as the first gate yawned open, releasing a trio of Volgrath infantry. They moved with a predatory glide, shoulders rolling, armor flexing like muscle rather than metal. Their weapons crackled with blue energy, humming with a frequency that made the air taste bitter. Calder didn't wait for them to fan out. He sprinted toward the nearest one, using its surprise as leverage. A quick slide, a pivot, and his elbow jammed beneath its plated ribs. The creature staggered, wheezing, and Calder tore the weapon from its grip before firing a controlled burst into the second attacker. The energy beam punched through the alien's chest, leaving a smoking cavity. The third charged, enraged, but Calder ducked under its swing and drove the weapon stock into its throat. It collapsed, twitching. The fight ended in less than 10 seconds. Around the arena, the observing warriors shifted uneasily. Calder heard the change in their breathing pattern, a chorus of disbelief. He didn't let the moment distract him. The weapon he'd taken felt wrong in his hands, its balance unfamiliar, but it would do until something better presented itself. He scanned the walls, tracking subtle movements. More doors were opening. The trial wasn't a sequence of stages. It was an escalating onslaught designed to break battalions. He exhaled slowly. They wanted to overwhelm him. So far, that felt generous. A second wave thundered out, these aliens larger and heavier, plated in a darker alloy that gleamed like wet obsidian. They carried shields that seemed fused to their arms, each etched with runes that pulsed faintly. Calder fired, but the shots scattered harmlessly across their surfaces. He adjusted immediately, stopping his retreat and rushing forward. They expected range. He gave them proximity. He slid between two shields, planted his foot against one warrior's knee joint, and twisted sharply. The creature toppled, bellowing. He leapt onto its back, wrenching free one of the glowing runic plates. The moment it detached, the shield's shimmer flickered. He hurled the plate at another attacker's face, stunning it long enough to vault clear of a crushing blow. He used the fallen warrior's own shield as a springboard, flipping behind the towering alien and driving the stolen plate into a vulnerable seam. The creature convulsed before collapsing. Calder retrieved a second shield and used it like a battering ram, striking with surgical precision. When the final warrior fell, silence rippled through the arena. Not stunned silence, but fearful silence. Sweat mixed with dust on Calder's skin, and his ribs throbbed from a blow he hadn't entirely avoided. Pain sharpened his awareness. He knew he could not afford mistakes. These battles weren't simply to entertain the alien commander. They were designed to measure him, to appraise the threat Earth had sent. He suspected the test would soon become far more personal. The floor trembled. A new gate rose, wider than the others, revealing a group of elite guards. These warriors bore no shields. Their armor was sleek, segmented, and their weapons were long, bladed staffs that crackled with red energy. They moved with disciplined coordination, eyes fixed solely on him. Calder felt the difference immediately. These were not fodder. They were Taz'kir's finest. They attacked without ceremony. Calder barely deflected the first strike, feeling the energy singe his knuckles. He rolled aside, drawing both shields into a defensive cross as two guards descended. The impact rattled his bones. He countered by locking one staff between the shield edges and twisting violently, snapping the weapon in half. The guard recoiled, but another swept in, slashing his thigh. The pain burned hot, and Calder staggered. Instinct took over. He rammed a shield into the injured guard's chest, driving it backward, then seized the broken staff piece and hurled it like a spear. It pierced another guard's throat joint, dropping it instantly. Calder's breath grew shallow, but he refused to retreat. He fought with brutal efficiency, turning every inch of the arena into a tool. When the final guard collapsed, Calder dropped to one knee, blood dripping into the dust. A hush swept through the chamber. Taz'kir rose slowly, his glowing eyes narrowing. Calder met his gaze, battered but unbroken. The message was clear. If this was the warm-up, the real fight had yet to begin. Exactly 600 words. Calder forced himself upright, leg trembling, vision momentarily blurred as the arena lights dimmed and reshaped into a single corridor leading deeper into the flagship. The shift wasn't random. It was an invitation, or a summons. The surrounding warriors parted in rigid formation, their silence now heavy with something more potent than disbelief, fear. Calder wiped blood from his brow and steadied his breathing. Every instinct warned him that what waited beyond the corridor was no longer a test of endurance or cunning. It was the confrontation the Volgrath had engineered from the moment humanity refused to surrender, and Taz'kir intended to end it personally. He limped forward, refusing to reveal weakness in his gait. The corridor walls pulsed with a heartbeat-like rhythm, as though the ship sensed the impending duel and was preparing itself for the spectacle. Calder ran his fingers along the strange organic surface, noting a subtle vibration beneath. The entire vessel felt alive, tied to its commander's will. That connection could become a weapon, if he survived long enough to exploit it. The thought simmered quietly as he entered a chamber vast enough to swallow cathedrals. Taz'kir waited at its center, no entourage, no guards, only a circular platform illuminated by shifting amber light. His armor had changed. Gone were the ceremonial plates. What he wore now was predatory, lined with ridges that pulsed in sync with the chamber walls. Calder recognized it immediately. A battle suit fused directly to the warrior, enhancing strength, speed, and resilience. A living exoskeleton. Calder tightened his fists and drew a slow breath. He had no armor left worth naming, no weapon he understood, and barely enough strength to stand. Yet he felt no urge to retreat. The mission had never been about survival. It was about victory, even if breathing came after. Taz'kir regarded him with a solemn curiosity. Human, you're unlike the others your species has produced. A lone fighter who dismantles cohorts. Your world should have forged armies in your image. Calder shrugged. My world prefers peace. I'm the price it pays when that doesn't work. Taz'kir's mandibles flexed in what might have been amusement. Then let this be the final exchange of death between our kinds. Defeat me, and the Dominion withdraws. Fall, and Earth becomes ours. Calder scanned the platform, noting energy conduits embedded within its surface. They pulsed in a steady rhythm, channeling power from the ship's core directly into Taz'kir's suit. The commander drew a bladed gauntlet that crackled with destructive potential. Calder's pulse slowed. If he couldn't overpower the alien, he needed to outthink him. The duel began with a violent lunge. Taz'kir moved faster than Calder anticipated, a blur of muscle and energy. Calder dove aside, feeling the blade's heat scorch the air where his head had been. He rolled to his feet, grabbing a fallen fragment of alien plating from the arena and deflecting the next strike. The impact shattered the fragment, jolting pain up his arm. He grit his teeth, forcing himself to stay grounded. He continued dodging, parrying, retreating just enough to irritate Taz'kir without revealing his plan. The alien's attacks grew more forceful, each strike cracking the platform. Calder finally angled his dodge, so Taz'kir's blade drove deep into one of the energy conduits. The chamber flickered. Power surged. Taz'kir snarled as his own suit spasmed. Calder lunged, grabbing a broken staff shard from the wreckage of the previous battle. With desperate precision, he drove it into the exposed seam beneath the commander's ribs. Taz'kir roared, swinging wildly, but the surge destabilized his balance. Calder twisted the shard, forcing the suit to overload. A concussive blast erupted, hurling both fighters apart. Calder hit the platform hard, lungs burning, ears ringing. Through the haze, he saw Taz'kir collapsing, armor dimming, breath weakening. Calder crawled forward, using the last of his strength to meet the alien's fading gaze. Earth doesn't kneel, he whispered. Not today. Taz'kir's final breath rattled through the chamber, and the ship's lights dimmed in acknowledgement of his defeat. Around them, alarms began to wail as Volgrath command protocols shifted to retreat. Calder pushed himself up, battered but victorious. He didn't celebrate. He simply stood, watching the alien fortress begin to withdraw, and allowed himself one tired exhale. Humanity had survived, not because it had armies, but because it had sent the one man who refused to break. Exactly 600 words.